Last time on our YZ250 Enduro build series, we tore this thing down to the frame, minus the engine because that was already out. But there we saw just how beat up this bike has gotten over the years, and that was only skin deep. Today we're getting into the meat of the project. We're disassembling the engine and mostly focusing on the bottom end. This portion of the bike is the most mechanically dense area. The bottom end houses the crank assembly, the clutch, the transmission, water pump, and a bunch of auxiliary pieces that make all these systems work together. It's important that we do a full analysis of its condition, and we'll be sure not to skip any steps here, because if something fails internally on this, we'll have to do it all again. So while our frame is out for some much needed powder coat, let's tear into this tired out engine. So since I've owned the bike, I've only done two things to this motor. One is I geared it down in the front, which isn't a big upgrade, but I did add a flywheel weight to make it easier to ride in the woods. With just a quick rough inspection, it seems like the crank bearings are making a little bit of noise, so that is the main job on here. But we're also going to do an update to the transmission to give it a wide ratio. I have some special parts for that already. We'll look at those later. Today, we're just gonna tear this thing apart and see what it looks like, because it's definitely been through the ringer. And you know, now that I think about it, I don't know if I ever actually drained the oil out of this thing. So we might have a surprise when I undo that drain bolt. Oh yeah, it's full of oil. As this sits and drains, we're starting on the left side of the engine, removing the flywheel, shifter, and drive sprocket. So in order to get this flywheel off, we need a couple special tools. One, we need a flywheel pin holder to actually hold it in place so we can drive this bolt out. And then after we get that nut out, we need this flywheel puller tool to actually press the flywheel off. Usually it's seized on there, so just having this tool makes the job really quick and easy. Ow. So that's a really annoying thing about this flywheel weight. Here's a stock one. These pins for that go in there really easily. They sit in there deep, yada yada, but this one, they're kind of recessed. So this tool ain't working too hot, so we're just gonna have to be careful. I'm gonna pull my impact out with the, whatever you call it, air compressor, and get this stupid thing off. Hey, we got it. Yeah, without this tool, that would be impossible to get off. So this part right here is our stator. It's what controls our spark, and you can adjust the timing by loosening these bolts and actually spinning this entire assembly. Looking at the flywheel, there is actually like a little magnet right there mounted to that's stationary, so each time this magnet passes over this coil, it sends a signal to send a spark. That's how you adjust your timing. You move this whole thing in relation to the crank. This bike's been running really good, so I kind of want to keep this right where it's at. We'll actually put a little score mark right next to that timing mark on the case. That way we can reinstall it the exact same way that we take it off. Ooh, loose. Loose, that's not good. Oh, sweet. Last one. Oh, cool. Those were not seized. That's good. Good luck there. And I was kind of stupid right here. Normally you want to take the sprocket off while it's on the bike so you can actually hold this with the drivetrain. And I'm also double stupid because I threw away the chain already because it was garbage. So we're gonna get creative and use an impact to get this bolt off. Okay, we got lucky. Oh, that's sad. So check your front sprocket bolt to see if they're ever loose. So this here's the clutch actuator. This pin should allow it to just slide right out. All right, so we're moving on to the other side of the motor. What we have here are the two case halves that the crank sits in, and then we have this right side case half. And we can actually take this all off in one piece without taking off the clutch cover. but I'm going to take off the clutch cover because we're missing a bolt down here at some point that had broken off. Gonna probably try a little welding trick to get that out in the future. But because of that, we're gonna take off the clutch cover as well as taking off the entire right side case. This would be much easier with a little engine stand. I might pick one up for the rebuild. They give you these little tabs to beat on to actually get these plates separated. Ooh, there we go. So now that we have that case off, you can see that there's a lot going on this side compared to the other side. We have our kickstart gears. This is our shifter that actually goes all the way through and out the other side. This is our primary drive gear, which spins onto the clutch. And once we get this clutch off, you can see just a little bit better in there. But now we're gonna work on this, take off these 6 bolts. And then there's a big nut underneath this whole clutch pack assembly, and the whole basket should pop right off. We got our throwout bearing. Still runs nice and smooth. And we actually have a dowel in there, which is our clutch push rod. And that goes all the way through the engine. Pull that guy out. And we're gonna leave this like that for now, so. This is one of those makes your life easier kind of tools. It's a gear jamming tool. This might not be necessary. You could probably use a hard block of wood, but we're gonna use this to get this main gear off. We have to bind this main gear with the clutch gear. That way we can actually get this nut broken loose. It's got a little magnet on it to snap it onto this gear. Be careful that that doesn't come out. I've heard that that happens sometimes, but snap it onto that gear. Boom, jammed. Make sure that tip falls into the gear and we should be good to crack this bolt loose. There we go. Beauty. This is where we need a clutch holding tool to get this off, because if you try to do it, it's just gonna spin. And this piece is aluminum, so we don't want to crank this down or we'll deform the entire clutch basket boss, whichever this one's called. Just snug like that. I want to make sure the tabs on this locking washer are completely flat. Then we'll use our electric impact. I finally got it. There she goes. Our needle bearings feel smooth, no play. Put that there. Kind of keep everything together. And then we'll remove our Kickstarter assembly. Just kind of pull it out. Get any washers left behind. We'll move down and start pulling out our shifter linkage assemblies. Yeah, I was gonna say you want to be careful or these plates will fall out. It's a good idea when taking apart these complicated pieces to take a ton of pictures. Luckily for me, I'm making a video of it. I'll take off this drive gear. If I went the right way, that'd be good, eh? There we go. Pull off the main gear from the crank. Should just come right off, keep everything together. All right, we're down to our 2 case halves, and now it's time to split it. Just gonna do a once over, make sure no washers got stuck, left behind. That way they can go where they need to go. But I think we're good. We have all the bolts here that keep this case together that we need to remove first, and then we'll go back to the other side. Okay, so to break this case in half, we're using another specialty tool, which is a crank case separating tool. This makes it so you don't have to bang on the cases. Half the time that doesn't work anyway, but this will mount to the case, and this pin will slowly push on the crank, separating the cases. Making it quick, easy, and we won't risk damaging any of our parts. So, wise investment. All right, we're gonna do this a little bit at a time, make sure we don't have any binding as it separates, and just go slowly. There we go. Woo, cases are split. Oh, transmission came out on this side. Right, I was 100% expecting this transmission to come out with the other case side, but we're gonna pull this out, set it aside, and kind of look at what we got going on. You can already see this bearing is toast. There's a lot of rust in there, and it's sad, it's dead. Almost, I need a third hand. Oh my God, there we go, sweet. So there's a good chance we're gonna have to use the crank puller to push this crank all the way out, but it's always worth giving the crank a couple taps because it might actually just pop out on its own. Yeah, that doesn't want to budge, so busting out the crank puller again on this side. It's being difficult. You can give it a couple wraps on the top to try and shock it out of place a bit. A little bit at a time. Ooh, yeah. So I didn't want to use the impact on it because I didn't want to break the tool or anything, but that was not budging, and that budged it. Ooh, there she goes. Wow. So now is the fun part. We get to look at everything in the motor, what's broken, what's tired, pretty much everything. But let's start with the boring stuff. Let's look at the clutch plates. These guys are actually in a little bit better shape than I thought they would be. Looking at the metal plates, which are mates to the friction plates, they don't have any discoloration, really no pitting or anything, so they're not in bad shape at all. Looking at the friction plates, I have to actually measure it with the micrometer, but there is definitely a good amount of fibers on there, but there was also a good amount of fiber in the oil. So I guess that'll be a judgment call when the time comes, but I think these could be run again. They probably have about half their life left. Moving on to the clutch basket and boss. I think this is called the boss. If it's not called the boss, I'm sorry. But clutch boss, it's got a little bit of grooving in the mating surface, which is a little disappointing. And the inner teeth look like they've been filed away once. That was probably really grooved from all the clutch pack plates. So this piece, I've seen better, I've seen worse. This might be on the chopping block for a new piece. The clutch basket looks to be in pretty good condition. You can see that there is a little bit of grooving on the teeth on the sides, but nothing substantial. This is good to reuse again. Now our crank. The actual connecting rod bearing feels pretty good, but I don't know, it just doesn't look to be in the happiest shape. It's got a bunch of surface rust, and it was really seized on that bearing. So since we already took everything apart, we're going to be replacing that. You know, I don't want to put a used piece back in there, especially with how everything is looking. And now to the case halves. Like, the case halves themselves are in good shape, but man, those crank bearings, they are shot. And honestly, this is what happens when you let a bike sit for a long time, especially if it's been waterlogged or anything. This thing did drown in coolant once, so these bottom bearings are covered in rust. There's pitting in there, they're not smooth. And on this case half, I can't even spin that bearing. That was the one that was seized on the crank, so I don't know if that happened from when we were actually pushing it off or if it was actually seized up pretty hard. So all the transmission bearings need replaced. You can feel pitting. They're all kind of crunchy, grindy. So every single bearing in these cases, we're gonna replace. And the last important piece of this is the transmission, and it looks like it's in really good shape. And we're also not using any of it. I have an entirely different transmission we'll be running in this bike. I already have it. I was waiting to get these out to make sure all the parts lined up, which they do. So we're doing a really fun swap in this bike, which I'm excited to do. We're not doing a YZ250X swap. We're doing a totally different one.
Also, a quick note, the cylinder looks to be in pretty good condition, though the exhaust flange does have some grooving from age. We'll be sending this out to a cylinder shop for a replate before putting it back on the bike, but I haven't quite decided where yet, so if you have any positive experience with a certain shop, let me know. Do you guys have any guesses as to what we're doing with the transmission? If you're familiar with these bikes, you might know, but tell me what you think in the comments below. I'm gonna get busy bagging all these parts for easy reassembly, but for now, thank you for following along today, and until next time, keep that rubber side down.